I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Board of Finance meeting for Monday, March 17th, 2014, to order. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all those who are celebrating it today. Item 1, public forum. Anyone wishing to address the board in public forum? Hearing none, let's move on to item 2. And that's to approve minutes. 2.1 would be the regular meeting minutes of February 18th, 2014. Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Comments, questions, changes, etc.?
I think I have an item. Next set.
Next set? I had none on the regular meeting. Anyone? No?
None on those.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? No. 2.2, budget public hearing minutes of March 4th, 2014. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Second.
I have one correction.
Yes, sir.
On page 6, probably about the 5th paragraph, I asked Mr. Mazza about what part of the total increase was related to increases in salary and benefits. And the way that it was put in the minutes was Mr. Trotta asked about the average wage increase in the budget. So just to correct the record, Tracy, I was asking what portion of the total increase in the town budget was related to increases in salary and benefits.
Okay.
That was the only item I had.
Anybody else?
A couple of typos, but I think this is significant. One is on the second page, the second big paragraph at the bottom, the paragraph that starts, Dr. Friedman explained that there's a 15 step. It says a first-year teacher is at a lower step than a teacher at the, it says step, it should be top step.
Spell check won't catch that.
And then there's also really a clarification, I guess. On page 3 at the top, Mr. Bloss said that a full-time paraprofessional costs $21,000. On page, page 8, he's quoted as saying it about $11,000 without benefits. So, well, in either case, it's without benefits, because the point of the part-time paras is they're not eligible for the benefits. So I suspect it's 21 and not 11, but both of those can't be right.
21, we're getting nods from...
2021 would be a full-time para, part-time para would be about 11.
So page
Hence the no benefit.
3 should be corrected. Oh, okay. No, it
Right.
says full-time.
One says
It does say
full-time and one
full-time.
says
So that's the distinction. Okay, great.
Good.
Let me see, was there one more? Full-time. No, that's it.
That's it. Any others?
I think on page 4, fourth paragraph down, Dr. Freeman said the money in this budget is the continue. I think it should be is to continue.
Good.
Researching the possibility.
Any others? Hearing none, call the question as amended. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
I'm abstaining, Matt.
Yes, Lou.
Actually, I'm abstaining because I was not there.
Right. 2 abstentions. There we go. Thank you. 2.3, budget workshop minutes of March 6th, 2014. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
I had one, probably everyone else grabbed this one as well, page 6, second paragraph. The mill rate would go up from 232.06.
Yeah.
I think that's 23.06.
Yeah, I saw that one too, Matt.
232 would be nice.
At least I didn't say it went to 232. If it went from 232 down to 26, that's another story. Any others? Good.
Hold on a second.
I will make I'd like to pass along a compliment to Tracy. She was able to very efficiently summarize both of my presentations on the impact of the mill rate in what seems to be a much more cogent fashion than I remember delivering it. So, Tracy, well done.
Actually, on the last page, And almost to that point, there was a discussion at the end of the meeting that is summarized as, there was a brief discussion about contracts and increases. Okay, this is on page 9. This is actually, was me, as I remember, raising the point, and it was a little bit of a refuting the statement about public sector wage increases. And I really would like the minutes to reflect that. I did say that at least the Board of Ed certified teachers contract, the wage increases for the top step was only 1.5%, which was the point I was making, and making the distinction regarding benefits versus just wages, which was a point that Jonathan and I had engaged in.
If that's the case, Lou, what I'm going to ask that you do is to submit in as brief a fashion as possible.
Yep.
An encapsulation of those points,
Will do.
and submit them to Tracy for inclusion, and then we'll vote on them next month.
That's fine. I'll send everybody.
Send everybody.
It'll be substantially in accordance with that, but I'll do it that way.
Thank you. Therefore, we won't call the question on those minutes. We'll have to bring those up at the next meeting. Thank you. Tracy, could you just send out another copy of it once once Lou submits it? Yeah, so I don't have to keep that one for safekeeping. Item 3, correspondence, 3.1, standing building committee minutes. Mike, is there anything you want to bring to our attention as you were able to make this one because there were no conflicts?
On this one, actually, I was able to make it for a small amount of time. I did have to leave. I have to be honest, I just got the minutes, and I haven't had a chance to review them because I just got back from
That's fine.
being away. So I'll entertain any questions and bring them back.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was, what caught my eye was item 15 under old business, letter B, the potential for energy-saving performance contracting. They raise, I think the standing building raised some important points here, and especially as we go forward, and going back to that assessment we had from an outside consultant, where any kind of Baldwin HVAC project, not that we're committing to it, could cost us as much as $10 million. And the notion that we don't really have a handle, I believe, and I think the SBC doesn't have a handle on energy-saving performance contracting yet.
Right.
But what they did allude to the fact that the state could provide some useful input here, and suggested a meeting amongst the 3 boards in which we could receive a presentation from the state, and I think that would be worthwhile.
Okay.
I'd like to just suggest that we recommend this to the standing building to consider, since they were looking for some general support on that.
Well, certainly
Okay.
we can agree with the standing building's position that
Correct.
we'd be
I will
happy,
bring
we'd
that
be
back
happy
to
to
them.
attend
Okay.
if they feel that it's appropriate.
I know this is, as you mentioned, something that they've just started looking into with more detail. I think a few years ago they looked at it, and it kind of went by the wayside. I think there was a change in chairmanship, and so I think now they're looking at it in more earnest, especially with that facility study, like you said, the assessment that was done. So I'll bring it back to them.
Mike, is this similar to, almost sounds like a wolf, or it's dressed up as something new, that energy performance is not new. Was it Johnson Controls?
No,
Years
it's not
ago,
new.
we did something
We went
similar.
through that,
Right.
and it didn't really benefit us at all, if you remember, Matt.
I don't know if you're familiar with Johnson Controls and the programs they used to run, which were, you basically bought their stuff, they guaranteed
You bought the
X
stuff and you
amount.
basically lease them out a certain
Yeah.
amount
Yeah.
of their, yeah. It's very similar. It's the same terminology. Energy savings performance is pretty much the same thing.
Now, can I just ask
But
a
they
point
set
here?
out
This is
criteria.
also related to energy generation on site?
Can be,
Okay.
can be.
Right.
That's where
Yes.
it would go.
Going a little further than the savings model.
Right. The savings is based on whether you're using existing systems or new systems to be implemented, but how much do it's a balance between how much is the short term versus, cost savings over time.
And is the idea that you traditionally pay for, or you pay for some of the system with the savings that you're actually going to
Yes.
realize?
Yeah, the savings pay off over a period of time.
time.
It could be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
We'd
Depends on the system.
certainly be happy to
Okay.
participate. Anybody else? Other points?
There is some HVAC, is there not, in the bonding we're going to be considering for approval tonight? In some of those projects, is there not?
I don't
believe there is.
HVAC, no.
No?
No.
Indirectly, I think there might be based on physical changes to the entries, but it's not anything that's HVAC directly related. It's
Nothing
more
at
physical.
Adams?
Is there any HVAC proposed in the two bonding proposals?
I did not see any.
Okay,
A lot of the HVAC at Adams is.
It's already been done.
Really
that's been done already.
Yeah.
yeah.
Anything further on standing building? Let's move on to 3.2, pension committee minutes. Sheila, I saw under 3.1 that the January rate of return, 7.29, is that January's return or cumulative year-to-date?
Cumulative.
Cumulative.
We're a little bit behind on the reporting for you because the pension committee meets now Wednesday.
And again, our target rate is 7.5?
I think 7.25.
7.25 now? Anybody else? Hearing none. There was one other item of correspondence that I wanted to bring up. And I think we all received a copy of an email from a gentleman, Ray Dudley.
Yes.
And it was relative to the consideration of using fund balance, undesignated fund balance, or what Mr. Dudley refers to as the $6 million budget surplus to decrease the 2014-2015 budget. Lou had asked, had emailed me and said he knows Mr. Dudley and was happy to take from church, I believe it is, isn't it, Lou? And was happy to take a stab at responding to him. And I think just
That
prior to this
went out.
meeting, that email went out. So, and I think you copied everybody
I
on
believe
it
I
as
copied
well.
everybody that Mr. Dudley sent it to. I sent it back out.
All right, well, I saw it, I saw that it came in, did not have an opportunity to read it. I suspect you are probably going to point out to him the need for municipalities to maintain a reserve for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is bond ratings, and the fact that First Selectman, I believe in his budget presentation, said that we are not relying on the use of undesignated fund balance, but I look forward to reading what you said to Mr. Dudley, so.
Thank you.
It was very well done.
Yeah, I agree.
I had a chance to read it right before the meeting. It was exactly that.
Good.
If not a little bit more.
He's good. You're good. All right, item 4. Review and accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education for February 2014. Linda? And Mrs. Balstracy? And how are you this evening?
Excellent, thank you.
Well, that's good.
And happy St. Patrick's Day. I failed to wear green entirely, which
I did too.
will come back to haunt me. My grandmother will find me in my sleep tonight.
Truth be told, the true color of St. Patrick is blue.
Failed on that count as well. I'm still in trouble.
Thanks, Matt. You're making it better.
If you look at the pictures of his garments, they were blue.
Yes. Alrighty, so let me, you have this in front of you, but let me just give a brief
Sure.
update. Expenditures for the month of February are $3,082,314.20. Expenditures and encumbrances through the end of February are 55.33% of the budget as compared to 55.93% last year at this time. We have received the excess cost grant of $1,044,757 in February, and these funds are recorded under tuition and special education transportation. Again, very briefly, salaries approximate percentage of the budget expended last year, as do employee benefits and purchase services. Tuition is lower than last year. The credit in February expenditures is the result of an allocation of the excess cost grant, so let's just keep that in mind. Supplies and materials are expended in a lower percentage thus far, as is transportation. Again, the excess cost grant is found in as a credit in the February expenditures. And capital is a bit higher than the prior year, but we do have the timing of the expenditures and reimbursements for the technology lease impacting that.
Ken?
I have a question about special education. If you would just look at your spreadsheet there for a moment. My eye caught two numbers that puzzle me. Special education is, as a category, is down. The percentage expended for the special education buses is down 10% over last year, yet the fuel is up by 20%. What explains that?
The fuel is actually done not on actual usage because we have no way of breaking it out. It's done on an allocation. And the allocation is actually based on the percentage of the budget amounts. So it's an allocation of the total dollar for fuel because we have no way of breaking it out because we don't know what they use for a regular bus versus a special ed bus.
So that figure is not a realistic figure.
No, it's not. It's just an allocation.
So the
It's something that
realistic
I'm
figure
looking
would, excuse me?
It's something that I'm looking at changing for next year, but because it's always been done this way, I want to keep it this way through the rest of this year. And then we're going to try and work on something better for next year.
But one would assume that that figure would be comparable to the special education buses.
But I don't have a way of breaking
I see.
out the fuel
Okay.
that's used by STA between buses. It really should be just one fuel line for all of our bus transportation.
I guess I have a follow-up question. Should that allocation also change now that there's more in-house students and you're not doing as much special education busing?
That's one of the things that I'm
Yeah,
looking at trying to
okay,
change.
I
and,
could see that.
Keeping it, because we're 3/4 of the way through the school year, I'm going to keep it that way for now, and then look at doing something different for next year.
Okay.
As I recall, your appropriation for 2014, 2015 for the special ed busing is down over, 2 years ago?
Yes.
Because it's already reflected in this year. The drop has already been reflected in this year's budget.
Right.
Where we're currently.
But our fuel hasn't necessarily changed because we are still running about the same number of buses in-house, and the fuel is for the in-house STA buses, not the contracted services outside district buses.
Gotcha.
But the fuel we purchase in bulk and then is dispensed at the, like the physical, forget the accounting for the second, just the actual fuel is dispensed at that bus yard?
Yes.
And what's the supervision over that process exactly?
We get reports on when they use buses for other services, and they estimate the mileages, so we track the fuel usage for outside services other than Guilford, and either STA will buy the fuel to replace what they've used for anything that wasn't our transportation, or they will reimburse us for the cost of the fuel that they used. And we do get reports, and it is monitored.
Yes, so, but is it, like, who physically is doing that? I mean, does it go right from the drivers to your desk, or is there some supervision in between there?
It actually goes through Nils Peterson, the transportation coordinator, and the bus yard, and then it comes to me.
Okay.
So Nils is down there almost every day, coordinating with the STA people.
Okay.
And then they report back. They give him a report, and they report back to me.
Okay. And then just to run that sort of thinking out to its conclusion, at the end of the day, everything's shut down, those tanks are shut, locked, turned off? What's that process?
I know the pumps are shut down. I don't know what the exact process is on locking down the pumps, but I can find out.
I'm encouraged that there's a transportation director at the facility working there during the...
He's not there
hour.
all the time,
Okay.
but he's down there a couple times during the day.
And STA has a manager there as well.
Yes, STA has their manager there as well.
Okay.
And, I guess, Lou, the same question could be asked of the other fuel depots that we have in town.
Yeah.
The one over by the emergency services facility, and there's one at Public Public Works.
Which is, I just got a sense, are staffed more continually.
Yeah, probably.
The pumps at Public Works have a key that are assigned to certain people,
Right.
and that it's reported on by that key number.
Mhm.
So when a key
Yeah.
is used, they know
Yeah.
what key number was associated with who.
Okay.
Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the way it was when I was at the town.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The security of fuel.
The Public Works pumps are controlled by keys, and you have
That's
to have a
correct.
key to pump gas,
Yeah.
and the keys are registered to certain people.
Okay.
And that's how they charge different departments.
Mhm.
Okay.
Because we've had, when there was a problem at the pump at the bus yard, we've gone down and the bus drivers had filled up at Public Works, and then it gets billed through the town
Town,
back to us.
Okay.
This is what it looks like.
Ah, key fob, yes. Sheila, just a quick question. Would the auditors have tested the process relative to dispensing and control over the expenditure of fuel at the bus yard? At any point, would they have tested that?
Discussed it, but they haven't done detailed testing on it,
Okay,
like
a full-blown audit, but
no. But it's part of their test of controls.
that's what I was getting to. Okay, and they've not seen any cause for concern for what they've, in a
No.
limited fashion that they've tested?
No, absolutely not, or they would have noted it.
Okay. I did have a question of that, the excess cost grant, the $1,044,000. Do you know exactly how it was split between tuition and transportation? Because I'm assuming, you know, even though you show a recording of a negative 725 on the tuition line item, I suspect it's more than that because we would have had expenditures for special,
Right,
for
so-
tuition during that month.
It's $876,238 for tuition and $168,519 for transportation.
Okay. And this just gets to, I know there's no easy way around this, but, you know, I've long struggled with the fact that we don't actually show the true cost of what we're spending in on the tuition line item, because we net it against the excess cost grant. And I'm of two minds on this. You know, it's sort of like the fireman's salary. We had no, you know, for a couple of years here, because some of that salary line item was being offset by a grant. This is in similar fashion. The true costs of tuition are never reflected in any of our budget documents, right?
Right.
Is there a way to work, I know, just throwing that out there, because
Yes.
I've struggled with that for a long time.
One of the things that we've talked about when we've talked about reformatting our reports
Yeah.
is to show a revenue or a grant line and show them as two separate lines.
Yeah.
So you would have the grant receipt separate from the actual
Excellent.
expenditures, so the expenditures would show as gross.
That would be helpful.
So that's one of the things that has been discussed with the reformatting.
Hard to reform it. Good.
And at this point, we're not going to be reformatting the reports until the start of the next fiscal year.
That's fine. That's fine.
I have a question, maybe going back to fuel a little bit here, but you seem to be doing pretty well for heat and bottled gas. And I was wondering what might be driving that. It looked like we didn't have nearly as much expenditures as the previous year.
Well, for the heat, we were using a lot of the heating oil that was prepaid at the end of last year because we hadn't used all of our contracted amount. So we just recently have used up all the prepaid heating oil. And then we switched Adams over to gas not too long ago, so that's shown a little bit of a savings for Adams. Bottled gas is really only used in the kitchens. It's not used for heat. So it's not a heating item, it's just a kitchen cooking source.
Okay, well, can't argue when we're doing well. I just was wondering what was driving it.
Do you anticipate surplus in that account?
Yeah.
So I guess I can't get away from energy tonight. I noticed that we're going up a little bit on electricity. I guess it's not too far out of line, but a little more spending than last year. Yet in the new budget, I think there was a prediction that we'd save $62,000 in electricity. So I wasn't really able to
put those two facts together, that we're sort of going along a little more than we usually spend this year, but we expect some savings next year.
Yeah, if I had a crystal ball when I did the
Okay.
budget, I would have done a little bit better with it.
Okay.
I'm hoping that I'm not off the mark based on the usage that I had seen. When I build the budget, I have to use the usage from the previous year
Okay.
and then kind of look at the first few months of this year because I start the budget in September, October. So I don't have much of a trend for this year to use. So I'm always going off of a year prior. I'm hoping
Not an
I'm
exact
gonna be-
science, a little bit of an
I'm
art.
hoping I'm going to be okay with my projection, going off of the year before for electricity.
Well, if you do some rudimentary analysis, we've got 380,000 left in that account. If you take the February run rate of 72,000, even though February's a shorter month, but there's a vacation in,
A couple days.
yeah.
A bunch of
so-
snow
Anyway,
days.
so if you figure 4 times 72, that's 280, so you'll be under by about $100,000, which should make it comfortable to drop next year's budget by the 60,
Okay,
right?
yeah. So you think the break is gonna,
Yeah.
yeah, all right.
Ken?
I have a question about tuition.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
When you look at the tuition figures here, and of course, it doesn't show the extent of what we're doing internally, as opposed to what, not quite. It shows a 9% drop in tuition, in the
Right.
tuition line. That's presumably been at least some of the payback for what we're doing internally. I just had a general question without divulging any confidentialities at all, not that you would and not that I would ask. But I noticed 3 sets of invoices in here that add up to $85,000 from 3 different educational institutions, the ACES and I believe there are 2 others in here. I can find those names. I know the Lorraine Foster School is one, the Foundation School is another. My question is, do we have any hope of returning any of those tuition dollars in subsequent years?
Yeah, you
Or are
can't,
those
you
schools?
can't, Ken, you can't go anywhere near that.
No. let me
Because
finish my
that
question.
would require a diagnosis discussion.
No. Let me
Because we
complete my
only
question.
offer certain programs.
Let me complete my question, if you don't mind.
Ken, last month, the chairman of the Board of Education cautioned us very
Well,
sternly
I'm not
about.
heading in that direction.
Okay, Ken, I'll give you some leeway on this, but please.
My question is, are there any areas that we could reacquire internally from the tuitions that are going out externally? That's my question.
That really would be a question that would have to be addressed by Pupil Services. I don't have that kind of information to make a projection on whether or
Okay.
not.
Is your question to this thing, are there other programs that we could
Yeah.
implement that would?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you started talking about the specific programs, I got a little
no. I
nervous.
wasn't talking about specific programs. I was talking about 3 substantial expenditures that caught my eye.
Okay, all right. I apologize for earlier, but we just have to be very careful with this. Again, we've been warned on a couple of occasions by the chair of the Board of Education and the superintendent on this. I think it's a good point. There have been some discussions about potential other programs coming down the pike. Is it safe to say at this point, we don't have anything concrete in place?
I think it's very safe to say that and one of the reasons is that while the programs that we have in place are showing a great deal of initial success, some of them are only a year or 2 old. So that I think it behooves us to, while we're seeing a great deal of success thus far in the initial findings, to move carefully as we move forward. I mean, these are our kids we're bringing back and, or in some cases are preventing placement of, and we want to make sure that what we provide them is top-notch. And we don't do that by taking on too much at once.
Too much at once. I'll take your question one step further. Is there anything in the report that was commissioned a couple of years ago that was suggested that we might want to implement that we have not or are considering?
I would definitely wait for Ginny Brown to answer that. I think she would answer it in the best possible manner. I do think that we have managed to tackle quite a bit from that report, but I would hesitate to speak for her. We can ask her if
All
the
right.
board would like an answer to that
That
question.
would be good. Mike?
Sorry,
Linda might have a-
Sorry. I just want to point out that the expenditures for this year, the percentage for this year that you're looking at, is after the budget transfer out of over 300,000. So it may not be an accurate comparison to last year because of the budget differences between the 2 years. Sorry.
I just wanted to thank you for the information from
Oh.
last month. I requested about the payment schedule, just get an idea of that. I think this would be a great guide looking forward, that hopefully some of us won't be asking the same questions. Well, is that a monthly payment? Is that a yearly payment? But it's a very good guideline, so I just want to thank you for that.
You're welcome. I have one more question, hopefully a little less touchy. Question about the telephone system. I think I'd noted in the last meeting that it was running a little high, and you said there's some additional charges now on the telephone line. I think it was for internet services.
Right, we've done Comcast Internet Services to try and improve the internet access in all the buildings, and those are additional charges that were occurring every month.
Okay, and so those are ongoing too, right? Those will
Yes.
extend going forward? Okay.
I wanted to go back to the documents that Mike just referenced that you send out. You're at this point projecting a surplus in the tuition line item?
Yes, I am.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I read it.
200.
I read it.
Wasn't that in the handout?
Yes.
That would be a first in forever.
And again, that's after the budget transfer out to cover the
Obviously.
additional salaries, so that's,
So it's really more like 500.
yes.
You've probably heard it before, and I'm sure you heard it from Dr. Freeman and Mr. Voss when they presented. The Board of Education could not be more pleased with the work that Ms. Virginia Brown is doing with our special services programs. And the financial piece, the positive nature of the financial piece is icing on the cake. But it's really spectacular.
We agree. Anything else?
Linda, on page 27 of the warrants, there's a couple of interesting items. One is a really small item. There's a charge for Survey Monkey, which I guess is a way to sort of coordinate scheduling or get opinions gathered. I didn't realize there was actually a charge for that. I mean, I've had those sent to me from other organizations in other
Right.
contexts. That it's $350. Is that a quarterly number? Is that
No, it's an annual
bill?
fee.
That's the annual fee, and so as much usage as you need for that?
As far as I know, it's unlimited.
Okay, and then the next one on the same page, as it turns out, is there's a $5,000 payment to the town for a truck.
Yes, it's a Ford F-550 dump truck. It was a vehicle that Public Works was getting rid of. We purchased it. We paid to have a new dump body, is that the right term, put on the back. We've used it for plowing, and it has come in very, very handy, so thank you, town.
What I've done is I offered to the school system, instead of us putting out to auction, getting rid of these trucks, offer them to the school system because they're only going to use them for plowing parking lots. And I couldn't see them going out and spending a lot of money for a new truck just to do parking lots, when these trucks are very capable of it. They needed some work, which Linda has addressed. So, all in all, the town saves money
Sounds
that way.
efficient.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
I was going to say, you're never supposed to sell a car to a family friend.
Sorry?
Actually, you shouldn't sell a car to a family member or...
Yeah, they'll be calling you up as soon as the oil needs to be changed.
No warranties issued.
If anything happens to the truck, we just bring it back to Public Works. We don't have to repair
Public
it,
Works
so-
fixes it anyway.
I had one question on your cover letter about, on capital. You said on the equipment instructional line is higher than the prior year due to the timing of expenditures and reimbursements from the technology lease. Could you explain that?
Right.
What is being reimbursed from the technology lease and why?
Under the technology lease, we purchase, actually this year, it's $600,000 of technology equipment, computers, equipment for the schools. We lease, well, it's not a lease that, we own the equipment, but we pay it back to a leasing company over 5 years. We pay for the bills, we submit documentation showing that we've paid for this equipment, they send us back the money. So we recoup the $600,000 that we spend in this year, back this year, and then we pay it back over 5 years back to the leasing company.
Wendy, you said 600,000.
I believe this year is 600,000.
440.
2014-15 or current operating budget?
Current operating budget is 600,000.
Okay.
But you're only budgeting for the lease payment, so you pay
Right.
$125,000 roughly for a $600,000 lease over.
Okay,
Plus interest,
right,
a little
and
more
it's
interest.
over 5 years, so
Over 5
it
years.
depends on what the amount is each year. Okay, I got you.
Others?
Professional development, looks like it's down a little bit. What was budget? Is that a reflection of the coaching?
It's somewhat a reflection of the in-house, but it's also somewhat timing. There's some things that are planned different times of the year. I don't think that line is going to be fully expended, but there'll still be some expenses coming through that line.
Okay.
Any others? None? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is there a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Education for the... Second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? None. Good. Item 5, review and approve expenditures for town government for February 2014. Good evening, Sheila. What would you like to bring to our attention? You're going to start with revenues, I suspect?
I was thinking
Oh,
tonight, I was thinking to start capital.
capital. There you go. That's
Sorry,
that's
Mike.
throwing a curveball at us. There
I
you
know.
go. Very nice.
I told you I was going to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah,
I can't say the same again every...
that's,
Okay, so I hope that you all got the email that I sent with the two reports. One is the town and one is the Board of Eds. It's pretty self-explanatory, but on the well, we'll start with the Board of Ed side. I have to say that I did send it over to Cliff Gurnham to take a look at, to make sure that, everything is in the right place, and he and I will probably speak shortly. We haven't yet. I think it's probably fine, but he has the final, okay on it. Basically, on the first page, those are all the projects that were approved at referendum prior to fiscal 14, and they've spent 90% of that amount that was appropriated. So of the $3.7 million, they only have about $392,000 left on the first page. And then on the second page, obviously, those are the projects that were approved for fiscal 14. And there's a little bit more left on those, but I'm sure that they are, you could see that there are purchase orders against several of the projects. So we have almost $1,250,000 left against,
that's the total 5.4.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I found something a little confusing here. For some reason, my eye wandered back to an October report, October spreadsheet
Okay.
on Fund 216, and one line that caught me particularly because when I looked at February 14, I see a curious juxtaposition here. The estimated cost for RTU replacement and upgrades at Adams, original estimate 834. Back in October, we said that 46,000 had been encumbered and 85% had been obligated. Now, when you look at February, you get to 35% encumbered and 82%
that makes sense, doesn't it?
It's reverse.
Because we've now taken the encumbrance and paid it down between October and February.
So that's actually correct, there's 82%.
Yes, that
You didn't consume the entire encumbrance.
right,
Okay.
yeah. And in many cases, they don't always, there might be some small residual amount left at the end of the project, and that's when Cliff can decide whether or not we cancel the remaining balance or not.
I always go under, can't go over.
Right, well, yes.
Well, you can't go over
Can't
certain
go over-
line items.
right.
and now
I'm talking about the whole question itself.
Yeah.
Allocation.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it's
So-
understandable he could have more of the balance available in February than he had in October.
Yeah,
You know,
because you reduce the encumbrance, right?
we
Okay.
will, we're gonna look at it and make sure that everything is appropriately in the, recorded, so
So,
I'll
so
keep that in mind.
to the point of the design of the report, which is really helpful, there's a number of items that are obligated exactly 100%. And I take it from that we didn't actually hit it on the button for that particular project, but if there was some left over for that item, it was maybe reallocated to another item within that same authorized.
That's correct. That's
Yep.
why the percentage is based on the revised budget column.
Well, 1201 is a good example of that,
Right.
where there was money shifted, but it's still not over, of course, but the
So
bathroom
did you-
renovations, there was a revised budget,
Right.
56,000 more was added, but the large space renovation geared towards cafeteria floor at Adams,
Dropped by 44.
they took it out of that and reallocated it.
Right, and we've discussed this a couple times, and this form has been a work of suggestions and helpful revisions, and it's really getting better. But if somebody else should happen to look at that and say, geez, how do we have so many things exactly on the mark? That's what's going on. Within that particular authorization, from time to time, dollars are reallocated to finish one project that maybe required a little extra.
And it is reflected, so you see that,
Yeah.
the original and the revised.
Okay.
So
Great.
The older,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
the older questions, the older ones will be different and reallocated, whereas if you look at the newer ones, of course, it hasn't got that level
Move
of
it yet.
detail yet to know.
Okay.
Okay, and then on the town side, if we can move to the town side.
Certainly.
Actually, First Selectman and we talked about this today, and I didn't print them all out for you, but we're going to add a column for completed, and I'm going to move the notes column over to the right, so an add project completed. There's many of them that are complete, that are at 100%, or some are below 100% and they're completed, so this way at least you know, and I'll try to do that on the Board of Ed too, but it's a little more, it's more of a moving target on the Board of Ed side because the projects
Right.
relate to each other. But here, you buy a truck and you're done. So on the town side, we've obligated a good portion of the original budgets, with the exception of some of the larger road projects and the energy project. Now, on the energy project, actually, we're going to apply the HVAC system upgrade for the police department to that account, because that's definitely an energy-related
Item.
project. So that's the $230,000 at the bottom of the page.
Yep.
That will be, we're going to actually break it up for you. On the next report, we're going to break up the actual projects that will be part of the energy audits and related repair line item, so you could see that.
Sheila, how come there's still such a large encumbrance on the upgrade of the police and fire radio system?
The project is still not completed yet.
Yeah, I realize it's not completed, but it seems like there's a very large encumbrance there. Is it that we just haven't paid it down yet?
Right.
I would be more concerned if the expenditures were high and there was an issue there, but the expenditures are low, so
Right.
we haven't gotten the bills.
Right. That seems surprising.
Yeah.
Even though it's ongoing, it seems like it's an awful lot to
I
be
can-
encumbered
I
still.
can
Wouldn't you want that money?
I can get a better answer for you on
But-
that. Actually, that's a good point.
I would, yeah, how far along are we towards completion of it? Because you would think progress payments would take you,
Well, the obligated number is 97%. Be interesting, what's the project completion? It's still, is it 97% complete, or is it?
No, it's not. It's a huge project, but we considered that part of it was to replace 2 towers.
Towers,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And the urgency was when we passed it to meet the federal requirement that we had to get to narrow banding by, correct me on the date, I think it was 2012, January 1, 2012. But there's still a lot of peripheral stuff that we have to do.
So just a follow-up question I would have to that, on the encumbrances, is that for the towers and the physical part of that, or is it more the software and the systems? Is there any way of knowing what that encumbrance is?
There is, and
the
I
breakout?
actually, I have it right here, if you can maybe ask me another question while I turn the page.
I don't have another question for this.
she won't listen to while she's looking for the other.
I could do that.
I know.
Or you could get back to us, that's okay.
Yeah, I have it here, so I'll.
Fine, that's fine.
So we see over the past 4 months, actually, not that much spent on these town bonded issues, but I would assume that it's going to pick up dramatically in the next few months.
Yeah, I mean, the large dollar items on these road projects, which are multi-year, and which require DOT approval plus DEP approval, and our own planning and zoning.
But the equipment purchases, that's going to,
That's fine. Yeah.
okay.
And the thing with equipment purchases, it's just going, like to a car dealership and buying a truck. The trucks are customized. We get them. Even the police cars to some extent.
Harder to buy it than give it to the Board of Education.
We do that later.
Sheila?
All of the encumbrance is for tactical communications, so I think it's probably a mix of hardware and software, and it was from December of last year when they were encumbered.
So the towers are paid for?
Yeah, I don't think tactical was
No.
being paid for the tower now.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Didn't we have to rebid that project, one of the towers? Wasn't there a?
No.
We had a consultant.
Bring on a
Consultant.
a
There
new
was an
consulting
consultant.
engineer.
That's right.
Yeah, no, but the towers should be all complete. I mean, we're using them.
Use it, yeah. Better be complete if we're using it.
I'm sure we paid for
Maybe
it.
not. All right, anything else on capital?
Yeah, actually, I had one small question on the new construction.
Okay.
I think the last time we got a spreadsheet from you on the new high school was back in September, and I'm sure it's changed dramatically since then.
September. Even longer ago.
I have
September a year ago.
just finished the budget based on the building committee's recommendation.
Okay.
And they now, the subcommittee is in the process of taking the payments that were allocated to only a few different budget lines and putting them all in the correct line items.
Okay.
So that's in process. By next month, that will be done,
All right,
and you'll see an actual full-blown report.
excellent.
That's great.
That'd be great.
Or if I get it sooner, we can send it to you.
You can send it out?
Because it's all ready to go. It's just waiting for the adjustments.
Excellent. Okay.
Revenue?
Revenue? There we go. Back to old habits.
Okay, so we have received 97.8% of our budget at the end of February. Last year, 96.96.
Yep.
So we're ahead of where we were last year. Most of the departments are strong. Tax collections are ahead of where they were last year. They're 98.65% this year, and they were 97.86% last year at this time. State grants are coming in as budgeted, and actually we're getting a little bit extra, as we talked about last month. Municipal aid we didn't budget for, and we did receive some money on that in February. Park and Rec is below the 66.6%, but that's because they will start ramping up their revenue collections in the spring with the beach passes and boat racks.
Yep.
So everything looks good on revenue.
It does. Just a quick question on the tax collector. The refunds, tax overpayment, is that an unusually high number this year? No, running about the same?
Yeah. Every year, I think that I should actually budget for that offset like we did 15 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But basically, it's collected, it shows up
Right.
in the current revenue, and then it gets backed out, so it's,
It's appropriately recorded.
It
there's
is.
No question.
Maybe you could elaborate on the good news. I guess there's more state revenue that came in, and
well, at
some
the,
of it may not have been budgeted for, maybe we didn't even expect it.
let's see. The 75,000, if you go to the last page 5, okay,
Yeah,
there's
I'm
the,
there.
well, what it appears to say hold harmless grant. They come up with all these different names of these, 1 and 2 year grants. I think it's municipal aid adjustment.
Right.
But there was, oh yeah, we did do it. We changed it. We actually showed, let me take a look at this. Right. We did not budget for the 60,989.
Yeah, that's the one that caught my attention.
Right, and that was one that was, actually what happened was $75,000 was the grant that was given to us right at the end of the state legislative session. But we had another amount budgeted for it was for a different purpose. That was the end of the municipal revenue sharing. That was the
Sharing, that's right.
56,000.
Yep.
So that got replaced with the 75,000, and then the 60,989 is new.
Right. And again, this
Good
is,
news.
this is primarily the difference in timing between us setting our budget and the state setting theirs.
Right. And they changed their mind a little bit.
Well, yeah, once in a while.
Sheila, are either of those two items that you just mentioned, the 0.35% sales tax, or is that reflected someplace else?
That is part of the 60,000, I believe. That's another thing that got changed.
How they were going to
We
administer it?
didn't get
We didn't get it.
the whole amount last year, and then they changed it and they renamed it.
Okay.
That was done the last day session.
Session, yeah. Which basically meant the state didn't have to,
Pardon?
the state didn't wind up having to pay a bunch of the aid that they were supposed to give to the municipalities, right?
We also got the Pequot grant that they told us we weren't getting when we put the budget together, so it's small, but it's additional revenue on that as well.
There's a lot of talk relative to property tax reform up in Hartford right now, particularly pilot stuff, colleges, universities, medical, hospitals, that kind of stuff. Our pilot revenue is nominal anyway, 18,000. Is that state property?
There's two. There's the colleges and hospitals,
Right.
and then there's the state-owned property.
Right.
So we have both.
What qualifies as hospital here?
Yale Guilford.
Emergency room?
They actually bought that facility? I thought that was owned by
It's
Fusco.
personal property.
Oh, the personal property, okay. And there's a lot of personal property. You're right.
It is privately owned.
Right,
The
but the
building
land
is.
itself, the building.
And the
but-
building.
Yeah, but the personal property is what we're getting the
Yep.
pilot exemption? the
Yep.
pilot
I
payment for?
believe it is, yes. I can verify that.
Cool. Any others on revenue? Youth and Family Services continues to come in strong, far outpacing the increase in their expenditures too.
Yes.
so. All right, I guess we can go to expenditures. Unless you want to go to something else. It
No,
really
I won't do
screws
that
up.
to you. Okay, so we have obligated 73% of our budget at the end of February as compared to 74.5 last February. And then if you adjust it for the storm expenditures that continue to follow us, we've expended 72.98% versus 74.52%. So in both situations, we are in a better spot than we were last year at this time, and last year we ended the year in a surplus position, so hopefully we're on the same track. Obviously, we have a couple of small issues. One is overtime in public works and winter road maintenance. We've expended more than our budget, but we're hoping that because public works has a large enough budget that they can absorb it in other lines. But we'll watch that, and they know that they need to pay attention and do the best they can do, and we won't put in a transfer at this point.
Public Works
until we-
was over 85% expended at this point
Right.
last year, and 79%, even though when you look at the detail on Public Works, there's a lot of overages in every predictable area, like overtime and road maintenance and so forth.
Right, and part of that is due to the storms as well and the timing of the grants that came back, but,
In February, we had 983 hours of overtime due to storms.
That's a lot.
You can see it.
That's more than your regular time. Oh, my goodness.
this won't be the first year that this has happened, and Public Works still is able to cover that with, other areas of their budget, because they watch the budget as a whole and they do a good job with it. I don't think we've ever had to do a transfer into Public Works.
I don't remember any.
And then legal is the other account that most likely we will need a transfer because of the labor negotiations.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a comment. Finance Director said she's absolutely correct. However, I don't want anybody to get the impression that we over budget. Okay, it's just that we manage it. There's line items that we have to reduce our budget allotted amounts to make up for the deficits in the other line items.
Gotcha. Sheila, on the building,
Good.
you gonna go there?
Yeah,
Go ahead, you ask.
I was just going to ask why building is so much higher than last year.
Because of the part-time building inspector that's working at the high school, and we'll be getting a reimbursement from the high school. We just haven't coordinated that yet.
And understand the whole reval, could you just explain the revaluation, why it's so much higher? The
Because
difference?
it used to be that we only budgeted a certain amount each year to cover the cost of the revaluation every 5 years. So we would budget between 40 and 150,000, say, per year. And we continued that because we had money still set aside in reserved fund balance for the remaining of this 2013 reval. So we only needed $40,000 more. The rest of it is set aside in reserve fund balance from when we had it the old way. We won't do that anymore now because the GASB has changed. So we're not really going to show an overage in that line at all. It will be zero. But we just have to do a transfer from reserved fund balance to cover it at the end of the year.
We've only appropriated 40,000 for this year, but the total spend is significantly more. So,
I have a question about the one at the bottom of the page. I'm not used to seeing the HVAC system line there. And I'm just wondering
Right.
if that was there. I didn't think it was there last
I did a
time
lot of
around.
housekeeping changes, Mike. You probably noticed that I fixed the general fund capital, I hope. On the HVAC and the Public Works truck, those were continued in force items that you approved in December, November or so, and they hadn't been on the report, and now they're on the report as they should be. It used to be, many years ago, when we had a lot of continued in force accounts, we had a separate report, but I don't think we need that this year. It's here and reflected.
Let's stay away from general fund capital tonight.
we can laugh at it. Sheila, under town properties, the three items there, utility, street lighting, and fire hydrant, all seem to be running pretty well below budget at this point. Is that timing? Is it,
street lighting and fire hydrants are most likely timing. It could be just 1 month behind on both of those because of the way the bills come in. On utilities, we're going to take a look at that because Linda had the same situation with the prepayments and the allocation between the departments, and we also have to look at that now that we've used up our prepayment. You don't know at the beginning of the year when you make a prepayment who is going to use what, how many gallons. So then when they're actually used, then we can do the allocation.
Okay.
And the utilities is mostly fuel.
That was it for my questions on expenditures. Anybody else?
And information systems, there looks like several lines, townwide area network, computer supplies and computer hardware are well below. Is that timing as well?
On the townwide area network, no, we'll have a surplus there because we thought we would be, we would have our new fiber lines installed earlier. So we'll see a savings in that line, and the others are timing. And they'll most likely be fully expended by the end of the year.
Any other questions on expenditures? Is it too premature to start looking at year end?
No.
My Bob Hartman question.
Yes, we did.
We're channeling Bob.
I didn't get an answer.
Yes, next month.
Next month? Okay.
Because we have to start asking the department heads to look at their encumbrances.
Gotcha. Questions on warrants? Special fund checks, general fund weekly checks, anything?
A special fund check question, minor item. There is a item on page 11 of the 312 warrant. It's under vehicle maintenance, and it's called a low rider helmet. A low rider helmet. It seems like an odd item for the town to be buying. Any takers?
Is that a lowrider trailer, did you say, or a helmet?
Helmet.
Which warrant just is that?
Page 11 of the March
Page
12th.
11 and March 12th.
Both March 12th.
Well,
Oh.
it's Paid to Excellence, which is in the company, the ambulance vehicle supplier, I believe. I could be wrong.
I think it says
No, you're right.
Firematic Supply
Fire-
Company.
Yes, okay, I'm sorry.
Is it some sort of it just seems like it's one item, it's $220, just about, it's just an odd item.
I'll check on it.
Okay. No
And
idea.
actually, if I had my laptop with me, or even iPad, I could now just look it up immediately, because if I clicked on the line item that you see in Munis, all the bills are scanned in and I could see it immediately. So we're going to get to that point. They're there, we're just not in the habit of, being prepared to look it up
So
at any
there's
second.
another one with an odd name on page 17.
Which warrant?
I think it's special funds.
On the front page, there's a warrant number.
031714.
714.
Looking at weekly warrants or
Special. And so on page 17, second from the bottom, there's a thing called a pillow block. Now, maybe this stuff will make sense. It's like jargon in any industry. No idea.
Thing they call you put your.
I don't know.
You stabilize somebody in a.
It's $170.
Okay, I will find out.
Good bill.
It's a good pillow.
Those are.
Thanks. And,
You gotta have another good one? You got another good one? You got one.
I do have a flag, but I'm not sure why. Oh.
Anyone else?
Go ahead, let me pass.
Anybody else? It's back to you, Lou.
It's on page 33, the same warrant, and this one just is, it's a payment to Utility Communications in Hamden, Emergency Call Police Department, $157. It's listed under vehicle maintenance. I just can't figure it out. Actually, it's a payment to Total Communications.
Utility communications?
Oh, yeah, Utility Communications.
Page 33?
Yeah, I
Page
see that.
33.
I assume that it's under
Vehicle maintenance.
vehicle maintenance,
Yeah.
so it
Oh, so
probably
it-
relates to one of their radios or some kind of communication.
Oh, I see. So like there was an emergency service call.
A service call, that was,
Oh.
right.
Okay.
I'm just curious as to, I see in that same batch of warrants on pages 43 and 44, starts on 43, goes all the way to the bottom of 44 on the rock salt and the ice be gone that we've been buying. Now, when I see a number down there like 26.3, that can't be all that it's cost us for this year, is it?
Load, probably.
One load.
Yeah.
Do we have a number as to what all this ice removal?
Yeah, if you
chemicals
look at
cost us?
your winter road maintenance,
Yep,
that's where your materials are. Materials being sand, salt, and ice begun. Go back to your expense report.
right,
Yeah, that's on page 9.
Yeah.
right.
36.
So the number there is 128,000, almost 129 expended, and then still about 12,000 more encumbered.
Covered.
So that's your expense, okay.
Okay. 130, roughly.
Anything further on warrants? Good to go? Good. Medical accounts, another tough month.
It's a tough month, but somewhat consistent with the previous
Yeah.
months. So I think, we're gonna, what we're projecting now is probably gonna be very close to where we end the year.
Okay.
We have 12 people on the over 50% of the stop loss. 2 have met the stop loss. 10 are past the $112,500 mark and approaching the stop loss. Whether or not that helps us or not, at the end of the year, it may, but I don't think that much, because there's still 10 of them that have more expenditures to go before they get to the stop loss. And we are exploring the stop loss alternatives. We are considering dropping the stop loss to, the individual stop loss to 150,000.
Right.
If we had that last year and probably this year, it would be worthwhile. We would have been, we would have had a savings. But
How
there's
significant a savings?
pretty much, we figured it's about, you'd say $50,000 more if there were 10. That's 250,000. It's very close. And I have to do a little more analysis on it. At first glance, it looks like there's a bigger savings, but then you're playing the odds again. And there are other years where we didn't have claims that were anywhere near as bad as this, and the premium is high.
Yep.
So we need to really study it and get some help from our insurance consultant.
Insurance.
What Seeger has shown us is that if we were to use, correct me if I'm wrong, Sheila, the current year, factoring the increase in the premium, we'd have to pay, reducing the stop loss from 2.25 to 150,000, probably saving in the neighborhood of 230,000.
So, would have helped, but it wouldn't have alleviated the problem that we're in.
No. but-
Right, and
But
then
when
it's-
you have 12 claims that
Right.
are pretty close to
Close
it,
to that.
that's significant.
Well,
I mean, I don't, you know,
Yeah,
you and I have been involved for about almost the same number of
Years,
years.
yeah.
About 2 years more than I have. I don't remember having a year like this.
I don't either. I don't either.
And that's exactly what I want to consider when we commit to almost 800,000 in premium, 6,800.
And
It's high.
insurance underwriters usually do pretty well.
Yeah.
That 800,000 is the differential between a 225 stop loss and a 150?
It's the total,
Oh, the
it's
total.
about, I sent you the numbers, Matt, and I don't know
Yeah.
if I remember. It's about a $400,000,
Difference.
I think so.
Track the average age of our group, year to year. Do we
Yes.
see it going like this and down? And
No, we have an older than average group.
and is that
On
kind
the
of on
town
the
side.
rise or on the?
I can't tell you exactly. We have utilization studies that are, 30 pages long that has a lot of data. They also trend out what they think based on the 12 claims, if they predict that they'll continue into next fiscal year. And many of these, they are saying will go into next year. But then we have to start from zero again, so they may continue, but we may never reach the stop loss. I don't, it's,
So it's potentially, hypothetically, somebody could basically cost, there could be medical expenses over a 2-year period of up to $449,000
Yes.
before stop loss would
Right.
kick in, because it happened to straddle two fiscal years.
and the
Unlikely, but.
Yeah, the drug costs are high too, and the stop loss does not cover that, so we had asked for a price on covering the prescription drugs. Just on this group of 12, we've paid $170,000. So if it's a small dollar amount, it may be worth it for that.
Okay. Anything else? Not much has changed on the golf course. Annual history of building permits. Anything else, Sheila? No? Excellent. Thank you, Sheila. Is there a motion to approve the expenditures for town government for February 2014 in the amount of $2,280,841?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? No. No? You good? Thank you. Item 6, consider and take possible action on resolutions for binding items for consideration at the April 8th, 2014 budget referendum. As I trust you all recall, at the budget workshop, the Board of Education said they needed to finalize the numbers on 2 bond projects, both capital improvement programs, one entitled Security Upgrades for Baldwin, Leet, Jones Lakes, the other Windows, Doors, Lintels, and Security Upgrades at Adams Middle School. Those numbers have come in a little bit higher than we had been talking about a week to 10 days ago. And I understand that is owing to the fact that there was some confusion, there were some delays in the process related to the scope of work and the engagement with the on-call architects, Mike. There was some question relative to that in a brief conversation I had with Chairman Bloss the other day, which is why they didn't have the numbers until as recently as they did. So the Board of Education approved, last week approved these 2 projects. The security upgrade in the amount of $1,600,000, the windows, doors, lintels, and security upgrades at Adams Middle School in the amount of $2,300,000. Is there a motion, and I'll take these separately, is there a motion that the Board of Finance recommends out to referendum, a bond question for $2,300,000 for costs related to improvements to the Elizabeth C. Adams Middle School, contemplated to include replacement of the windows, doors, and blinds on the south section of the building. 2, replacement of the lintels above windows and doors in the 1936 building. 3, interior renovations to the majority of the classrooms in the southern section of the building, and 2 science classrooms in the 1936 building. And 4, security upgrades, including the renovations to the main office, to relocate the office to the front entrance and allow direct entry from the vestibule, and modifications to the cameras, door access system, and mass notification system. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Okay. Questions, comments?
Out of curiosity, how many doors are we, and windows are we replacing in total?
Do we know, Lynn?
I know that there are 15 rooms, I think, is that accurate? I don't know if I have the exact number of doors.
Are we to assume it's the entire front facade of the building, all those windows, the lintels above all those windows and doors? And there are some on the backside by the library, but as well.
It's the 1936 section, all 3 floors that they're doing. I don't know how many doors it is.
What's the expense per window?
It was not broken out like that for us. I don't have it.
I'd like to maybe ask a question. I don't really have these numbers in front of me, but I probably have them somewhere. But how much debt is being retired next year, approximately?
That's in the budget. I'm thinking close to 3 million.
Sounds about right.
Yeah,
Okay.
does sound right.
And then I guess I'll comment if I'm understanding last year's request compared to this year's request. Looks like last year's request was approximately 16.3 million.
No, 1.63 million.
Sorry, 1.63 million, thank you. And now we're looking at 3.9 million?
Right.
So more than twice as much request for bonding this year. And I do want to comment that, you know, this is on the heels of the bonding for the high school, just right on the horizon.
Yep.
So I would perhaps say it might be a time for a little bit of restraint, maybe to consider only what's critical to bond.
Yeah, I'm going to paraphrase the chairman of the Board of Education, who had asked a similar question, I believe last week, indicated that this is a reflection of the district's commitment to build no other new schools, and that maintenance and upkeep and upgrade to the existing school buildings is imperative to the ability to be able to continue to use them and forego the potential to replace any new schools. This, from my perspective, this has been a program similar to what we're doing on the town side, even though the town comes out every 2 years, is to take pieces that need to be done and do it in smaller parts. I believe, Joe, when you and I first started serving, we were on the heels of a $31 million school renovation project, similar to this.
Yep.
All right, in terms of, you know, taking care of delayed maintenance items over the years. So this has sort of been the theory, is that if we're going to keep these buildings, we need to invest in them.
And just probably reiterating the same old comment, but obviously these repairs to the school are not a bad thing, they're a good thing. But I will just ask again, you know, are we just trying to do too many good things too quickly? Could this be done in phases? Do we really need to accelerate our spending, our capital spending, you know, so drastically, from at least from year to year, from what I'm seeing here?
No. It's a legitimate question. I can make the case for the fact, yes, that
If I may.
Sure.
I think in particular with Adams, Adams is a school we really need to pay attention to. So the fact that that this bond for windows, doors, lintels, et cetera, if we are not going to be rebuilding a middle school, And we know that Adams is a building that we're going to need to take care of, and we know the kind of shape it's in. I think that we on the Board of Ed would argue that this is a particularly important maintenance project for this school.
Can I ask a couple of questions on Adams, particularly the $2.3 million portion bonding proposal, which is exclusively Adams for starters, right?
I believe so.
I believe it is.
Yeah.
A couple of questions, really. One, there's a section in there for security upgrades to the office, which appears to be very similar to the security issues in the other bond. And I'm just
Yes.
sort of curious why that wasn't included in there in the security package as opposed to the other general space renovation package, which certainly appears to be the case with the rest of the 2.3 million, if you know.
I'm going to ask Linda if she knows the answer to that, and then otherwise I'm going to give it an attempt.
I believe the rationale for that was to put everything together for Adams so that we have everything that was directed towards Adams, so everybody could clearly see what this entire project was going to cost and not have it split between the two different bond issues.
Right.
Adams.
And do you-
Because
No,
part
no, I realize
part
that.
of
Do you-
ripping the building apart,
That's right.
there's going to be some crossover with some of the projects that it was.
Right. Do you know what portion of that 2.3 million is out? Because it seems to me that this changing around of the entryway and the office is a significant portion of that project. I'd be interested to know what the breakout is between that part and replacing these windows. Sort of a follow-up on Peter's question, which was, what do the windows cost? I'm more interested in what the security
What part of the
changes are going to
security?
be.
I don't think we have it broken
Yeah, I
down
don't have
that
it broken
way,
down that
unfortunately.
way.
Okay. Thank you.
Basically, obviously, in order to get to this level, we did have competitive bids. There were several different vendors. No competitive bids?
Yes, it was competitively bid, which is part of the reason for the delay. They went through the bid for the on-call architect and
But we don't have
on-call.
contractors. Do we have contractors bidding on this?
No, so it's
That's
just,
a,
it's
that's a,
just,
that's a distinction.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
That's a big difference. So there are not, and this is the rub with municipal financing and capital projects, is you need to have an appropriation before you go out to bid, which is a backward system in the way the world works. You know, you basically put a price out in the marketplace by saying, this is how much we're willing to spend, we
it's
go
just
do
the-
it. So
just the
the architectural thing
work,
has been
right.
taken care of.
Right.
Agreed.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll have the expert weigh in.
This question's come up several times over the years, and I'm a little bit concerned on these numbers because I seem to recall that there's been more detail. And I don't know, what concerns me is it says the estimates were generated from prior projects. And then it starts going to by who? Was it the on-call architects? I mean, it's nice to see 1% construction admin and management, 10% contingency, which is 4% bond issuance, that's appropriate, but I'm looking at a 2.3 number and I don't see any type of logistical breakdown that's even close. I mean, it's just a 2.3. I don't have any comfort in how much is the security? How much is the different portions of the project? And I'm not saying let's break it down into 16 divisions and have it into a lot of detail. But there's been years where, early on, when I was on the board, where it seemed like there was a lot of question about where the numbers were coming from. And then we seem to do better, and we seem to get better detail. This one, both of these, it's not very clear how the estimates were developed. I mean, I would love to have Cliff Gurnham sitting where you are, and the Standing Building Committee. And then what I did is I try to look in the notes to see what discussion there's been about the bonding, about the projects, and I honestly don't see anything in here that talks about the bonding projects and where the estimates were developed from. So I'm not saying that the projects aren't needed. I do agree that for all the philosophical and capital reasons and everything that's been said, I agree with the projects being done. I just don't really have any comfort level in the numbers except for what it says here. Generated from prior projects, actual construction costs will be determined by A&E firm. It would have been nice to have an A&E firm brought on to look at it and say, okay, here's what our scope is. Can you provide us some, level of detail for a certain amount of money, that, we had, what I'm trying to say is there's bonding questions that have had design costs in them. Saying design costs for this particular project. There's the study that's done, design cost is done, and then we get a better number. This just seems to be a round number that's based on what? And I don't get where it's coming from.
There's something else you put on your other hat in standing building, that you had worn. You notice that paragraph F on both proposals calls on standing building committee to act as the building committee for each of the two projects. Now, have they been involved to this point? Just trying to read through their minutes, and you kind of get this as something going forward, but not up to this point.
I believe they have reviewed these projects, they have already gone through them, they've approved the projects. I know that they had not received the updated costs. We didn't get the updated costs until prior to our meeting last week. The costs were being sent to Cliff Gurnham 5 minutes before our meeting started last week.
But to address Mr. Ailes' concern about the, the reliability of the figures.
If I could, major I'm just reading off of, I guess this is probably number 4 for Adams. I'm assuming it's the entry. Renovations to the main office to relocate the office to the front entrance. Okay, so that's the entry part. I'm looking at the building committee minutes from February, it's March 4th. There's one page that says February, I read it wrong. There's an update on the Adams window doors renovation project, and there's pretty extensive discussion about Silver Petroselli, putting together plans for Adams Middle School, which seems to be about the final design for the entry. Who's vetted the numbers for the lintel replacement? Who's vetted the numbers for all of the doors? Which somewhat goes to Peter's question, is how many doors are there?
Windows, but doors are too.
Doors, windows.
Basically, I don't like to see aggregate numbers. I like to see the per unit numbers. Because I think they're going to be more meaningful to me.
But we're not at this level. We're not going to get detailed numbers. What I would personally like to see is those 4 items somewhat broken up a little bit more.
Sure.
So that if we said, okay, we'd like part of the, maybe we'd like to see the Adams security changes move over to the security issues and break up Adams, and so keep all the security reconfigurations together and put everything else. I understand the reason why Adams was kept together, but at least we could have that option of saying, well, why isn't the $250,000 or let's say it's $250,000 for the security at Adams? Why isn't that put with security and evening out the numbers instead of having 2.5 and 1.6, 2.3 and 1.6? It's just maybe it's.
I share the concern that the board members have relative to the lack of detail on this. The question I have, and this is directed at Sheila, how much time do we have before we have to approve this in order for it to make it onto the...
You really have to approve it tonight. It's already been given to the registrar. I mean, they could pull it off, but it's being published this Friday. We'd have to pull it from the paper, which we can do.
Okay.
But there's really not much time to make a change to it. Tomorrow?
Well, I'm also a little disappointed. We had these documents at the time we had our public hearing, and these very same questions weren't asked at that point. And the Board of Ed might have been able to provide that level of detail to us. And to raise those questions at this late hour, given the timeframes that we're up against, is somewhat difficult. But I understand why the questions are being raised. It goes to an integrity question as to the integrity of the numbers. And I certainly share the concerns. I, for one, am going to move forward, and regardless of what we do at the Adams Middle School project, I am comfortable, more than comfortable, with putting the security upgrades forward.
I agree with that.
All right? I'm also concerned that we have an identified need for security upgrades at Adams, which is part of the other question. And not moving forward with that security upgrade at this point is not an option that I'm very comfortable with either.
It doesn't seem to me, and this is what happens when you leave a meeting early for other meetings. I was at the Standing Building Committee meeting and not at the point where they talked about what appeared to be issues or items that refer to these questions. It doesn't seem to be a lot of weigh-in or input or conversation about it, except for Mr. Gurnham making comments. For example, for the district-wide security upgrades, there is a statement here, the architect is working on cost estimates for these projects. My only question is, well, were they done a couple of days later and then fed to the Board of Ed to make a decision to move them forward? But I don't know what those are, and I would have to make an assumption that the building committee is okay with these numbers. I don't see anything that would lead me to believe that the building committee weighed in on this to say, yeah, these are reasonable numbers. And I can't tell you, even as an architect, whether these are reasonable numbers, because
You haven't seen the plans.
I don't know exactly what is entailed in what
The scope of work. Yeah.
Scope is okay, but not the
I'd like to ask
detail.
Joe a question.
Is it fair to say that we might be, if we were to phase these projects over multiple years, we might be more prepared to present a more accurate project?
I think that, I think logistically, no. I think we should have them all together. Because it's just going to come back and do a project, they really do tie in together. So if you're going to start doing lintels and you do windows and then the doors and then you're going to do a new entrance, all of those are needed, but if you keep coming in to do it, you're remobilizing, which is
If you
just
focus
adding your
on one
overhead.
school, Mike, and then move on to the next
Oh,
school.
you're talking about
following year.
having the security upgrades and then doing Adams later?
Yeah.
Well, the problem with that is that the security upgrades at Adams are just as important and as needed as the other security upgrades in the
Just
other
broken
schools.
off.
So,
years.
but you're doing a lot of work at Adams that you're not going to have to worry about touching it later down the road.
We have, there is a precedent about this board not authorizing expenditures on a bond, an approved bond, until it comes back to us. We do it with the Board of Selectmen's bond packages. We did it with the land acquisition. Is that something we might want to consider here?
Well, I'd like to
I'm
ask,
not sure I follow you, Mr. Chairman.
The Board of Selectmen cannot expend any money on the bond funds that we've approved over the last couple of years until they bring the projects back to us for a yay or a nay. We did the same thing with the land acquisition fund many years ago, as a safeguard.
And we do the same thing on the town bonding projects.
That's exactly what I just said, on the town bonding projects. What's that?
It's in the resolution.
It
It's
is.
in there.
Yep.
Can
So
Sheila
we-
tell us where that is? What paragraph?
It's toward the end of the first paragraph. No contract may be awarded.
Okay. Oh, the same language, it's in the town bonding.
So are we comfortable that that gives us the right down the road to refuse to spend money on a project until it is fully vetted?
Following receipt of recommendation of the Board of Finance with respect to, interesting language. Lou?
No, I mean, it's exactly what we've been doing with every one of the
Exactly.
town proposals that's coming before us. I mean,
Right.
I actually had a question about that. It seemed like it was a little backwards. It's a recommendation must go to the Board of Selectmen, but the fact of the matter is that's the process we've set up and it's been
well,
working.
just say we go first.
Jeff, you concur?
Yeah, the process really is that we, in our case, approve the bids, and we would have to approve them for the school,
Right.
but you all have to release the money.
Right,
That's your oversight.
exactly. So they can't land any contracts until they get the money from us.
I like that opportunity, Matt, to have another look at these. I mean, I kind of agree with Mike the way he summarized it exactly. I would be very reluctant. We've identified these safety issues, and really to the point that you were making too.
Right.
We've identified these safety issues, we're moving forward. I would be reluctant not to sort of single out a particular school and say, well, we're not going to do the safety issues on this school this year, and we're going to defer that.
When we've already identified a need for
It makes some sense to move forward with those. My concern is, which is why I was asking, I was interested in the security issues at the front of Adams, as opposed to these. I'm not saying that the Adams windows are not necessary to do. I just would like more information about them before we were actually at a point where spending money.
I think there needs to be a point of clarification here. Adam, the windows are only one piece of what they're doing there. There's classroom renovations.
I understand it. I got you. They happen to provide us with a photograph.
I just want to be careful, because the message is not, we're spending $2.3 million on windows.
Right.
Right.
Let's be very clear.
Well,
Although, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, and you've read them all before.
Right.
You know, before. Here's my concern, if it wasn't clear, is not that we're going to go over a $2.3 million or a $1.6 million bond resolution. I'm not concerned about that. My concern is the Board of Ed and us, we as a town, shooting ourselves in the foot, because the number isn't really 2.3 to do Adams, it's 1.8. I have no idea, knowing whether, I would hate for it to go down, because it's looked at as, well, those are needed, but boy, 2.3 sounds like a lot, and the voters go out and they vote against it, because they're not really, they're voting for a number. I mean, I'm all in favor of sending these forward. I'm just saying that I'm not comfortable where the numbers are coming from, and I don't want the board to shoot themselves in the foot by putting a number in there that's got lots of contingency in it and a lot of number where it's really not needed, when we might spend 1.5 million.
I do think, if I may,
Sure.
I do think one of the things specifically about the contingency, at least in terms of Adams, there are definitely concerns about things like PCBs in the windows, that we're spending money on kind of randomly testing and maybe getting results about that.
A 10% contingency is not uncommon. That's my concern, is that you might have an actual number that's out there, and then there's a 10% contingency for things like PCBs, which you are absolutely right, that is a concern. But it could be 35% that we need for contingency on PCBs nowadays. But I don't know what the actual is versus the contingency number. I mean, I could just back out the 10% contingency and back out the percentages and come up with a number that's your actual, but.
Now, Mike, I'd like to see, all the work get done eventually, but I think about the assessment they recently did with the school, with the new software they have. I mean, I think they can identify just literally millions and millions of dollars of worthy projects, but we just can't do them all at once.
This is a very small portion of it, though.
And that process has happened already.
If it was 5 million total, this is a big chunk to cut off. I mean, there were some numbers thrown out of 60 million short-term over 5 years to do. This is a very small portion.
Well, my point is, you need to prioritize at some point. So
I think,
I feel that maybe we need to
and I would like to argue that
prioritize here.
prioritization is in fact happening. This report is being looked at very carefully, and there's some things in it that we are not going to do.
Adams was the number one priority. High schools taken care of, the elementary schools are in good shape. I think it was Adams and then maybe Baldwin, and then the elementary schools.
Absolutely.
And that's the way the priorities were. So I think the priorities are being tackled. But the security by far is the biggest priority, we all know that.
If I also may say, Mr. Ailes, to your point, I do hear what you're saying in terms of kind of the number maybe going over. I do want to say, simply for the purpose of the public, which doesn't exactly speak to your point, but that the Board of Ed is certainly in the habit in the past of not spending all in the bond if that's not what the project comes to. And I do want to, that doesn't speak to your point, but because you brought up the change in money, I do want to say in general that that's a habit we've had, and it's a habit we're going to continue.
It's a great clarification, because that has not happened. That's very true, and I would think that these numbers are probably going to be sufficient.
Okay.
But to what point are they sufficient? There's that accuracy level that I'm not seeing. even another step, another level
Okay.
of allocation.
Does a breakdown of those numbers exist anywhere of the 2.3?
Oh, I'm sure they.
Oh, they must,
Yes.
absolutely.
It's a-
Well, there's a couple of things. One, if you do some very quick math, the total cost for the 4 elementary schools for the security upgrades is $1.8 million, even though, because we're taking $200,000 from a previous bond authorization. That basically works out to about $450,000 a school, right? So take that right off the top of the Adams project. We're looking at 1.88 something, 1.88 million for the other stuff, other than security upgrades. I would offer the following, that we have some protections here relative to us authorizing the spends, any dollar spend on either of these two resolutions. The second piece would be that I would, if we were to call a vote on this tonight and to approve it, it would be with the absolute understanding that the Board of Education, within the next week, provide this board and the community with the level of detail that we're looking for, or as much detail as we've received in the past, all right? Which, take a look at some of the documents Mr. Ireland used to put together. I think John used to run that project, right?
Some detail.
That, not to use, no, I won't go that far, but the faith that this board would be putting, the good faith this board would be showing by allowing this to go to referendum would make it absolutely imperative that the Board of Education get this information out into distribution almost immediately. That's, go ahead.
My only thing, Mr. Gurnham had a procedure today, and I'm hoping he's going to be in the office tomorrow.
Okay.
He may not be. I know he was responding to emails and texts earlier, so I will get this information out to you. We will get it on our website for the public as soon as we can.
Okay.
But that's why he's not here tonight, is because of a medical issue.
Okay.
Could I ask
Certainly.
maybe a recommendation
Yep.
to the board that I call the chair of the building committee also
Certainly.
and talk to him about what the building committee's feelings are regarding these numbers that may not have come out in these
I'd appreciate
meeting
that.
minutes, just as feedback.
All right.
One piece, if we're getting information, one of the items I'd be interested in is the 2.3 million Adams project is in the interior renovations that Matt rightfully observes is a significant portion of this, is the interior renovations. It says the majority of the classrooms in the southern section of the building and 2 science classrooms. I'd be interested to know exactly how many classrooms are in that section of the building and how many are being proposed to be repaired. And is it 2 science classrooms out of 2? Or are there more than 2 science classrooms? You don't
I know with the science classrooms, they're moving classrooms from the 3rd level down to the 2nd level to keep like a pod or a team together. So they're moving science classrooms within the floors as part of this project,
Right.
and renovating 15 classrooms. I don't know how many total classrooms are in that section.
All right,
You don't
well,
have
as
that
the
data.
info comes out, that would be helpful.
Okay. Do you want total?
15 classrooms?
15,
what-
yes,
that's-
15 classrooms are being,
That would be a little more precise than majority.
and then there's a science classroom, for instance, as Linda's just saying, there's a science classroom on the 3rd floor that's going to be switched with an English classroom on the 2nd floor in order to enhance, teachers' ability to work in pods and enhance the academic.
What, Sheila, can I ask you a question as to, you were saying this is going to be published by the New Haven Register in a day or two. By charter, how late may we defer an approval?
Well, I think we have 7 days prior to the annual budget meeting to publish, which means that we could pull it from the Shoreline Times and put it in the New Haven Register on a short-term, give them a day or two's notice, and it would be far more expensive. We were trying to conserve the advertising cost for the legal notice.
You're talking thousands of dollars,
Yeah, I know.
Right, to publish a
which
legal
hits
notice.
our budget.
Yeah.
The other question is the voting machines. They absolutely, the drop dead date was last Friday for the question. So I don't know what that would entail as far as changing the question on the voting machines.
So we're at a deadline now.
Yeah, we're here. We're here.
Well,
Comments?
I forgot, did we have a motion?
There is a
We're
motion.
in
There's a
discussion,
motion.
right?
But
The
the
motion and second, right?
For both resolutions.
No, just one.
Just the one, the
Just the one for
1.6
Adams.
right now?
Oh, I'm sorry, for the 1.6?
Because I thought you
I
came
thought we
back
read the
around
2
and said
point-
only the
2.3.
security.
No, that's what I would be, this evening, I would absolutely have to have that this evening.
Right.
Yes.
Could you maybe review the motion?
The motion that's currently on the floor is the first item, which is a $2.3 million for costs related to the improvements to the Elizabeth C. Adams Middle School, as I read them out earlier, those first 4 items. All right, and the bond resolution reads, further down, that this board has the right of refusal to release funds if we are not satisfied with the project scope.
The costs associated with that scope.
Costs associated with it.
I think it's, I mean, my only further comment is, I think it's a much-needed project.
Right.
I have no problem sending it to the voters, because I do believe it's a priority. Both of these are priority. No issue philosophically, no issue with the scope. Again, I'd like more detail, but should that hold up this question, or the next one for that matter? I don't think so. I just think this board would feel much more comfortable with
high
what,
level of detail.
and with what we're asking. I think it's fine.
And I agree with that summary to a large extent as well, but I want to add a couple points. I don't have a problem with the project. We've done space renovations to other classrooms and other buildings. It seems to me a cost-effective way to maintain our facility. We've made that commitment to do it, and it's worked. My question, and at this point, just with regard to this $2.3 million proposal is, since it involves Adam, is I'd be curious to know, as we're gathering information and sharing it, what we've spent on Adams since we've made the commitment to maintain the building as opposed to replace it. So, I don't know if that's the last 10 years. I guess I'd be interested in what we spent on capital at that building over the last 10 years. And
Yeah, actually, that request was made by the Board of
made
Education
that
as
same
well.
request.
Okay.
So it's
Yes.
being worked on.
okay.
The request
And in a
has gone to
sense,
Cliff.
where everyone can get a feel for what we're spending versus what we would have spent on a replacement building, and hopefully that'll be a favorable number. Matt, you're...
Sheila, did you?
Well, I've built projects on Munis now, so they're by school. You don't see it on the report, but I'm able to get that information to the extent that the invoices are coded correctly.
Okay.
I probably can do that. And the other thing, too, is don't forget on your capital report, there's a $2.3 million project here, and it's broken out into 16, I just counted, sub-projects within it. So you're going to see the same thing with this project. I'm sure that you're not just going to see one $2.3 million line item, right?
Okay.
But it's just, and I think the point's well made. We worked over the years to get to a point where we had sufficient amount of information upon which to make our decision. And this time, we don't seem to have that at our disposal, owing to whatever delays there were relative to the, as I mentioned earlier, there was an issue relative to the on-call A&E firm and scope of work, because that's what, up to $25,000
Right.
engagement?
Right.
And this wound up exceeding that.
Exceeding that, which
So
meant we
the
had to-
architectural firm
which
did
meant
not
we had to
actually
go out.
perform the work, and they had to go back out.
It delayed the project
It's
significantly.
actually been bid twice.
I'd like to add a caveat to this. I'm willing to move this forward too. To support moving this forward tonight. And if we take quite seriously the fact that literally half the words in both resolutions involve a follow-up and enough checks on the part of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, standing building moving in on this. And I'd like to invite the Board of Ed to invite Mr. Gurnham to come before us at the next meeting, the next monthly meeting, and give us more detail on this, so that we can at least gain more comfort with what is planned and what is moving
Yeah,
forward, even though we have, we have the right to modify this.
Right.
But at least we'd feel comfortable, given all the changes that have occurred, the fact that he was unable to be with us tonight.
We can get detail out to you prior to that, but we certainly will
Right,
invite
and
him
because
to come.
I think what's important is for these board members, when asked in private or in a conversation at the supermarket or at their church hall reception, is this legitimate? And we need to be able to answer that question.
Just to play kind of the devil's advocate, what happens if the project costs us only $2.9 million, so we have $1 million that we're bonding in excess of what we need? What happens to that $1 million?
We don't
appropriate.
We don't go out to the street. It's an all that's happening here, Peter, is an authorization to borrow up to that amount.
I see.
And if we don't need that amount, we just don't go to the street for it. And it's, you'll see in a lot of those, in those capital reports, when we close out projects, there are some that we don't spend. Joe, what's deauthorize the expenditure? I think the greatest example of that was when we did the police department.
Okay.
We
came
had
in
basically $1.5 million under the authorized spend limit, and we just didn't borrow it. Because you,
Well, I could support this resolution then.
good, thank you.
did that with the emergency service, the
Right.
fire headquarters, the same thing.
I hate to belabor one last question. On this project, it's not for the next one, but it says this project is scheduled for construction during the summer of 2014.
Yes,
Okay.
Pretty aggressive.
that's the plan.
Yes, the discussions that they've had, they said that they can do this over the summer.
Who's that?
This is between Cliff Gurnham
Okay.
and the architect engineer that was giving him the numbers and was doing the project. I'm not sure, exactly who that was that gave them.
Be worth every penny if they do it in that.
And the other
Amount of
project,
time.
14 and 15.
The other project's 14, 15, right?
Right.
In phase, so that's why I don't have the same
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
just for this.
I don't want to hold, I don't
brief
want to hold
comment.
back on
I
security.
still feel like we're on the horizon of probably the biggest capital purchase we've maybe ever made historically in the new high school. And I just still feel like there's a time for restraint in capital spending. And although worthy projects are usually identified, I still think there is the ability to prioritize them and phase them and create a debt structure that's a little smoother. So I do have trouble supporting this particular bond request at this level.
Any other comments?
I have a general comment on that. The next item on our agenda involves the auditor, appointment of an auditor. And I think the auditors have traditionally told us that we are safely within our bonding parameters.
Yeah.
And I would urge you to consider that. We're not bonding to beat the band here.
Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Recused? None. All right, the second item is the Board of Finance would recommend that referendum that the town of Guilford appropriate $1.6 million for costs related to security improvements to various town school facilities, contemplated to include security upgrades to the main entrances and offices to allow for direct access and view to the main entrance, ADA accessibility improvements, new cameras, additional buzzer doors, upgraded glass, and additional lockdown buttons at the Calvin Leete School, Guilford Lake School, Melissa Jones School, and Abraham Baldwin Middle School. Is there a motion? Second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I think it's got, there was a lot of reading here about cameras and buzzers, and I mean, the amount of money here is for physical changes to the entrances. This is construction.
Right.
This is not just equipment and cameras, and this is major reconfiguration. So if there's any question.
Adams too.
Adam, well, yeah, I don't want to talk about Adams anymore, I think I killed that one. But yes, Adams
See
too.
what you
But
guys did by pulling them.
And, well, it includes, for instance, at Jones, because of the level of the class, of the room that is involved in this project, it literally requires an upgrade of the outside walkway slash driveway. I mean, there, so that this is, right, so this is, thank you, Mr. Ailes, I mean, this is involving more than just
well, there's
than
quite a
cameras
distance from the
and.
entry to the office.
Right, I mean, so
So
in
there's
some
got to be a
cases,
whole
it's really.
procedure and change
In order
it.
to create a secure entrance, there's a fair amount of construction at some of these schools, at least, that's involved.
And I noticed Cox is not included in that list, that's already taken care of?
That was done in the
Yes.
project that was done last summer with the windows and doors and, so Cox has already been completed.
Yes.
They've got a whole new
Oh,
secure
yeah.
entryway into
You
Cox.
think so?
Yeah, there's no question.
Do we have any idea if there's federal or state funding available to offset some of these costs?
Not that, or I'm aware of.
I thought that was mentioned during our budget hearings.
I think it came up.
And I don't remember the amounts, I don't know if it was mentioned, but I think it was very minimal
Yes.
The
numbers.
security funds that were, I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
Go ahead.
The security funds that were available really were geared more towards the places that don't have the security features that we already have. We are actually steps ahead of a lot of districts in what their school security is. So we would not be eligible for anything. One other district that we do know that applied got minimal amount from the security grants that were available.
And it's mostly equipment. I think it's mostly equipment,
It's
not
mostly for the doors,
reconfiguration.
the buzzers, the cameras, the.
Oh, okay.
All right, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, carries. Thank you. And
Thank you.
we anxiously await some
Absolutely.
follow-up detail as we described.
And we will take the
Mike?
comments into consideration for future.
Mike, would you
as well.
happen to have any of the old documentation still lying around that, you know, you were referring to that showed specifically how some of that breakout was done?
I believe I have it.
You have it?
I believe I have it from previous years. We can
You probably have it more readily available.
go back through,
Good.
come up with as much detail that we can provide for you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, discuss and take possible action on appointment of auditor. Before we do that, Sheila has the audit documents. You have the audit? Okay. Well, we can pick them up on our way out. We don't necessarily have to do that. But Bloom Shapiro is currently our auditor, and you'll be receiving a copy of the audit. We are in year 3 of the 5 year that we approved earlier. By charter, we have to approve no less than 90 days before the end of the fiscal year. The auditor, it's pretty perfunctory since we had gone out to bid, and we chose Bloom Shapiro. And it is my recommendation, my motion that we engage Bloom Shapiro as our auditor for fiscal year 2014-2015.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Just a quick question, so we're under contract with them already, or?
We're not we're under contract with them for this year. These are renewable 1-year contracts, but we bid out a 5-year contract over, and they were clearly the
We have an
lowest
option.
responsible
We
bidder.
have an option to renew.
The first year, we entered into a contract with them for 2012, and then each year is at the town's option to
Option to
extend.
renew. And we've been very satisfied with Bloom Shapiro, I think. And as always happens when we go out to bid, you know, the finance office always gets nervous because they think they may have to train a bunch of new young audit partners, or not even partners, young auditors from the next firm that comes in. But all right, did I call the question? All in
Call
favor?
the question.
You did, all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Thank you. Committee reports. Mike, anything on the high school? I was unable to attend the event
was
2
no
Fridays
event.
ago.
Yeah.
I
well,
attended the event and it was a non-event.
Yes, it was a non-event. I was actually going to touch on that, but just a real quick update, really more for public purposes. As of last week, the Black Box Theater, there's been discussion on that. On the 25th of February, the committee voted against moving forward with the Black Box Theater. It was really because they didn't feel they could expose the risk of a black box theater to the cost of the project as of this time. Does not mean it will not come back, but this early in the process, they could not look at putting that kind of money into it and being too close to spending contingency, so.
And the existing construction that's taking place doesn't preclude them adding it later?
That's a good question.
It does not. I mean, they could add it later, it just means it'll probably be more cost, but the question is how much less of the contingency are you spending? Their burn rate was at a point where they felt comfortable where it is now. Adding the black box would make it much more
Close to the
challenging.
edge.
Yes.
That's a prudent move.
And so right now, they're holding off on it. So it's not scrapped entirely forever, but it is right now, this early in the process, not moving forward. The interior palette, which really means is the interiors of the building, the colors, walls, yes? Got to change it?
Have they